Welcome to the other side of medicine, everyone. I'm Dr. Christosik, Dr. J, and tonight we have a special presentation. I'm really thrilled to bring this to you. This has been some time in the making, and tonight we'll be talking about fiber. Is it the cure or is it the cause of gut health problems? This is a question for a lot of people today. There's a lot of controversy about the different types of diets that are out there, the FODMAP diet, the paleo, the keto diet. And now we have an even more extreme diets besides these low carb diets that have been around for a couple, 2-3 years. Now we have the carnivore diet. It's pretty bizarre to think that people are going to such extremes, but when you're not feeling well, it's understandable. You do whatever you can to help yourself feel better. And so tonight we're going to be looking at what does the research, the latest findings. And so I really want to let you know there is a new alert out there that people don't know about. A lot of doctors who are practicing natural medicine out there, many of them are still using old research. They're not getting the updates on the information on things like probiotics and prebiotics and different types of diets that are going to help to not only prevent gut health problems, but to cure gut health problems. And not only that, but to help to stave off long-term problems that could end up to becoming people to have premature death. We don't want that for you or for anyone. So I hope that you get ready to learn about some things that are really very, very striking and things that I have to be honest with you, things that I personally, as a functional medicine physician, have had to rethink because for years, I used specific things and they weren't actually the right therapies, but we didn't have any more information to go on. So we used what we had. And so as I learn about new things, I try to bring that not only to my patients, but to my listening audience. I've been doing that for over 35 years on the radio and now on this podcast, in my books. And I really pledge to people to continue to bring the latest information, even if I have to swallow my pride and say I was wrong. And I was wrong on some of the things, not all of them, but some of the things that are significant. But on a lot of the things, I was spot on, and I continue to stay and continue to propose the things that I've been doing for the last 35 years because it's based on cultural traditions of diets from people around the world who research has shown clearly, demonstrating without a doubt that not only does it bring short-term health, but long-term health. That's what we want for you. We want you to be able to live independently healthy. And so a lot of doctors today don't know about these things, but I have to really give a shout out to the University of Stanford Medical School Research Center, the Microbiology and Immunology Research Center there, School of Medicine. I think they're doing a marvelous job with really educating people and helping them to continue to look into the forefront of this frontier information on the microbiome, which is our gut bacteria. So I really want to dive into that right now and kind of move along and talk about the microbiota. But again, before I do, we got to really give thanks to the people who are doing research. And there's a lot of people I want to applaud tonight. And it's not going to be everybody, but there's some of the major players out at Stanford Medical School, Microbiology and Immunology School of Medicine, like Christopher Gardner, Sean Spencer, and the Sonnenbergs, These are really, Erica and Justin Sonnenberg are doing a marvelous job at the Sonnenberg Research Center, specifically, really doing an amazing job to help us to learn about the microbiome, the bacteria that lives inside of our digestive tract. The microbiome is not just in the digestive tract, it's all throughout, inside and outside of our body, in the skin, and every single part of the body, including the gut. We have different bacteria that are living there, and that makes up the microbiome. But a big portion of the microbiome is made up inside of the gut. And we have literally millions and trillions of bacteria that are living there in conjunction with our body. We have literally 100 times more genes of the bacteria than we do of our human genes. And so we have to recognize that our gut health is paramount to the rest of our body's health. And that's what these researchers are finding. So once again, I want to applaud those people there and really help to let you know that we are in the early stages. The continuing research brings out new information every single day. And I'm trying to keep up on that so that you and your loved ones can take advantage of the latest research. But once again, many doctors are still using old information. And so tonight I'm going to reveal some of the striking new research, and it'll open up your eyes to things that you can make some changes and get some real benefit. And I've got so much information to share with you. And I don't think we're going to be able to get through it all tonight. So we'll have to continue this with another podcast. And of course, the guests that I have on this podcast will continue to bring updated information on the gut microbiome and how we can improve our gut health through nutrition and improving the proliferation of beneficial bacteria inside of our gut. We're flooded with information on the internet, in books, and a lot of it's still old information, and that people are still sending this information out there, and the average person is confused. They don't know what to believe or who to believe. And so I hope that some of this information that I bring will clarify for you what the latest research shows, because it's a whirlwind of information out there that the average person just gets overwhelmed by it all. So most people, again, know that drugs and surgery are just treating symptoms. And I think people are fed up with that. And they're looking for avenues, different ways that they can transform their health and not have all the side effects and all the complications from the medications or the surgical procedures. And people are looking for ways to be able to get to the underlying cause. And we know that the drugs and surgery aren't getting to the cause, they're just treating symptoms. But what we have to realize is that for a long time now, there are doctors, natural doctors, and there are people who are proposing things on the internet and in books that they're trying to get people to buy products, whether it's things like probiotics or herbs or supplements, different kinds of supplements to treat gut health problems and treat chronic disease. But unfortunately, what they're still doing is just treating the symptoms. And I'm going to share with you how we need to make a change. We need to follow the latest research so that we can get to the root cause of problems. Because if we're not getting the right food, because food is medicine, then we're not going to get to the right cause, and we're going to continue to suffer, and we're going to continue to just treat symptoms. So it's no secret. The average American is looking for a quick fix. That's why people are attracted to doctors who treat with drugs and surgery, because they want to continue to live the lifestyle that they're living in America, eating ultra-processed foods, and then, of course, not getting adequate exercise, drinking excessive alcohol, smoking cigarettes, and not making the right lifestyle changes to get to the root cause. And so people are attracted to treating their symptoms with drugs and surgery. And there's a growing population, though, who are fed up with that. And I applaud those people who are looking for answers, looking for a new direction. But I just say this: consumer beware, because there's so much misinformation out there. And I'm going to share with you tonight how people who are supporting these low-carb diets, people who are supporting carnivore diets, they're just treating symptoms. People will get relief. There's no question that people are going to get relief. And I'll explain why that is. They're going to get quick, short-term relief. But the problem is they're going to have long-term health hazards, things like heart disease and cancer and brain disorders like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and autoimmune diseases that are going to develop because they're not getting to the root cause. So we are going to show you how to get relief, and even quick relief, but getting to the true cause. That's what you want. There's nothing wrong with getting quick relief, but you really want to make sure that you're getting to the root cause at the same time. Temporary relief for gut health problems like bloating and gas and constipation or diarrhea, or having inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, or even autoimmune diseases. All these things that people are suffering with today are because of the ultra-processed diets. And it's no secret. People know that. People are awakening up to the fact that the food that we have on our plate is triggering much of the disease that we have. And so when we look at the bacteria in our gut, science now is showing that the bacteria living inside of our gut, the good, the bad, and the ugly, they have a profound effect on our well-being, or on the reverse, it can trigger all kinds of diseases. And we're actually experiencing the dangers and the hazards of eating these ultra-processed diets and not living a healthy lifestyle, not getting adequate intake of fluids, and drinking excessive alcohol and smoking cigarettes and getting in these ultra-processed foods. These things complicate our health and end up having disease. So the first thing I want to talk about is I'm trying to establish strategies here that will treat disease by helping to improve the bacteria we have living inside of our gut. It's because these bacteria have a profound effect in helping us to manage weight, to boost our immune system, to help with brain function, to help with managing stress levels and protecting our body's heart and liver and lungs. And all these conditions that people are suffering with today are affected by the bacteria living inside of their gut. And after you see some of the information that I'll share with you tonight, your eyes will be awakened to not only some things that you might have learned about the gut and how it's connected to all these health problems, but how we need to get to the root cause. So I want to take a look right now and talk about something I think is really significant. And I want to talk about unindustrialized nations, people around the world who are living very close to nature and are not affected by society and by modern lifestyle and ultra processed foods and the stress levels that we experience in our cultures, the pollution. They're living in these isolated areas, and we can learn a lot from them. And research is demonstrating that these people's gut bacteria is significantly different than the bacteria that we have living inside and of us. And now there's reasons for that, because they're eating a simple diet. Basically, for the most part, a plant-based diet. They're eating some animal proteins in these cultures, but it's minimal amounts. And they're getting a lot of fiber from the food that they're eating. And as a result, they're having healthy communities of microorganisms living inside of their gut. It's really interesting that scientists are showing that the gut, when they analyze it, of these unindustrialized nations, of these people, these cultures, that they have 300 or more different varieties of microorganisms, of bacteria living inside of their gut. At the same time, in the industrialized nations, specifically here, like in the United States, the average American has 100 or less of different type of microorganisms living inside of their gut. That's a dramatic decline in the bacteria, the beneficial bacteria, that you're going to see as a profound effect on helping to not only prevent disease, but help to cure diseases. And it all depends upon the food that people are eating. You're going to find out it's dramatic. And I really want you to look at this slide carefully, because if you look at on the left, these are unindustrialized nations' gut bacteria. You see, all those to the left are from unindustrialized nations. Those to the far right are industrialized nations. So you can see there's a dramatic difference in the culture of bacteria that are living inside of these unindustrialized nations compared to ours in the industrialized nations. The set of bacteria living there are dramatically different. So that's important to understand. And researchers are seeing that we have lost a lot of the microorganisms that have been living inside of humans for tens of thousands of years. And now, because of our decadent lifestyles, we have lost a lot of these bacteria, and consequently, we have a lot of disease and a lot of symptoms that we're experiencing because of the loss of these bacteria. This is really a beautiful picture of the inside, the internal environment of the gut. Inside of our gut, we have a very thin layer of cells, only a one cell layer thick lining on our intestinal tract. The gut lining only has a one cell layer thick body of cells living there. And that's demonstrated in this blue picture, this blue area on the screen of this slide. So those are the cells, the cell layer that we have living inside of our gut. The next layer, and by the way, this picture won a Nobel Prize for science, demonstrating the beauty of the internal environment of the gut. And if you look at the next layer, the green layer, that's what we call the mucus lining. And that's very, very important to understand, because that protective lining helps to separate the cells of the body from the next area, which is that rainbow layer of cells, which are the bacteria living on the other side of the mucus layer. So we have the first layer in blue is the lining of the cells, the one cell layer thick of our gut. The next layer is the protective mucus lining that helps to keep the bacteria at bay and out of our digestive system. And then we have the microorganisms, and there's trillions of them living inside of our large intestines primarily. There's very few microorganisms living in the small intestine. They mostly live in the large intestines. So I want you to really pay attention to this because this is so important. And as you'll see, these layers get disrupted. And as a consequence, we end up having microorganisms start to get into our bloodstream. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I want you to understand that this is normal, what you're looking at right now. Now, the digestive tract, if you're looking at this here, it starts from the stomach and then goes into the small intestines. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, there's very few microorganisms, very few bacteria living inside of the small intestines. And by the way, it's not just bacteria, it's bacteria and viruses and yeast and parasites and all kinds of different microorganisms living inside, mostly inside the large intestines. And these, when you look at the outside of the cells, it's very close to the blood circulation. And I want you to really pay attention to that because that's going to really be an important point that's going to determine a lot of things that we'll talk about coming up in a few minutes. Once again, inside the large intestines, you can see these little rods. Those are microorganisms living there. And again, we have trillions of those microorganisms living there. I want you to understand that what is happening is when we eat foods, especially the ultra-processed foods that we have in America, we're eating foods that are lacking fiber, and they're primarily refined carbohydrates, which we're eating a lot of: white bread, white rice, white sugar, and refined grains, and all these foods that are very highly processed. And so they lack fiber. And so the sugar molecules that are there get quickly absorbed inside of the small intestine, because that's where nutrients get absorbed, in the small intestine. So when you have sugar, which we need, by the way, that's in the food, we need that, it gets absorbed in the small intestines. Whether it's the sugar molecules or the starch, it gets broken down inside of the gut of the small intestines. And that's where you absorb proteins and fats as well inside the small intestines. The problem is that by the time the food gets into the large intestines, as it's broken down, there's nothing left for the beneficial bacteria living inside of the gut. That's a very important point. So the flip side of it is that the diet that we're eating doesn't have food to feed the beneficial bacteria. Again, cultures from around the world that are unindustrialized have been eating unrefined carbohydrates, and that provides a lot of fiber, which is food that gets, the fiber is undigested. It doesn't get broken down. You see, the bacteria inside the large intestines have many, many hundreds of different genes that break down fiber. We have 20 different genes that break down the sugar, but we don't have the genes to break down the fiber. So we're starving these microorganisms, whereas the unindustrialized nations of people fed and continue to feed these beneficial bacteria with the fiber. And so the fiber is the nutrients that the microorganisms thrive on. Okay, on the other end of the spectrum, when we eat these high fiber foods like these unindustrialized nations do, and when you eat natural food like broccoli, or if you're eating whole grains like brown rice or quinoa, or you're eating beans or legumes or any other type of grains, or you're eating any kind of starch with fiber, those things, you're going to absorb the nutrients inside of them in your small intestines. Remember, the sugars and the fats and the proteins, but the fiber goes through the small intestines, ends up into the large intestines, and that bacteria in there, that's the food that they're waiting for. They're starving for that. They're just craving that fiber, but we're not giving that to them. And so we really need to feed them these highly unprocessed, high fiber foods that are complex, that are very, very, they have bonds, they have bridges that are stuck together that only the beneficial bacteria can break down with the genes that they have to break down those fibers. Again, they've got hundreds, tens of thousands of different genes to break down these fibers. And when they break them down, they make compounds that we call short chain fatty acids, SCFA, short chain fatty acids. These are hundreds of different compounds that are what we call metabolites, and they affect our body's metabolism. They help us to lose weight. They affect our brain. They affect mood. They affect our stress levels. They affect the immune system. They affect our heart health. So many different functions. These short chain fatty acids have a profound effect. And where do we get these short chain fatty acids? It's the bacteria inside of the gut that break down the fiber, and then they make these compounds called short chain fatty acids. And so, again, these are things that we need to pay attention to. And the Sonnenbergs at the Stanford School of Medicine, they have found that these, they call them microbiota accessible carbohydrates. Microbiota accessible carbohydrates. It's MAC for short. I gotta tell you, they call it the Big Mac. It's the real Big Mac you should be eating. I think it's pretty cute. So they call these carbohydrates, these microbiota accessible carbohydrates, Big Macs. And they're the fuel for the gut microorganisms. And again, they're rich in carbohydrates. And here's the point I want to make to you, okay? When we're getting these complex carbohydrates from beans and grains and legumes and fruits and vegetables, and we'll talk about also resistant starches, which are very important. We'll talk about that as well. These compounds are what the bacteria thrive on. And so, again, this is what the unindustrialized nations are eating every single day. if you look at that picture earlier of those people that were sitting around that fire, they were eating and cooking tubers like sweet potatoes that they had thrown in the fire that were loaded with these compounds and vitamins and minerals and nutrients and phytochemicals that feed us, nourish us, and feed the bacteria at the same time. So again, if we do not feed the microorganisms, which they're starving for, they want, and we're not giving it to them in the average American diet because we're eating these refined and ultra-processed foods, the bacteria are starving for them. And so the next thing that's going to happen, which is very serious, is that we end up having damage to the lining of the intestinal tract. Remember that blue area that I showed you earlier in that slide that was the one cell layer thick? Well, once again, if you look on this slide, that one cell layer thick is the very bottom layer, or the pink layer. Those are the cells, the one cell layer thick lining in the intestinal tract. And then the next layer is the inner mucus lining, which I shared with you earlier on that slide, which was green in the slide. And then there's an outer mucus layer, which the bacteria hang out in as well. So the bacteria cannot get into the cells and damage them and get into the bloodstream, because not only are there good bacteria, there's harmful microorganisms that are living there too. We have about 80% beneficial bacteria, even in healthy people, even in these unindustrialized nations, cultures, these people, they have about 80% beneficial bacteria and microorganisms, and about 20% harmful. There's that balance inside the body. We don't know why that is, but there's good and bad living amongst, but the good keep the bad in check. Just like in a neighborhood where you have a good, healthy neighborhood, you've got a lot of good people living there. You may have a few bad people who are living there, but the good ones keep the bad ones in check. And that's the same way it is in the digestive tract. So when you look at this layer, it's a protective mechanism for us so that our bodies stay healthy and we have normal digestion. When the bacteria, when they are crying out and starving for these fiber foods, what happens is there's damage to the lining of that gut, and the mucus layer, that blue inner mucus layer, is rich with carbohydrates that the bacteria are going to eat. They're going to eat that mucus layer because they're starving, and they're going to start to get rid of that protective lining, that mucus layer, and then they're going to start going and damage the cells beneath the mucus layer. Once again, very important to understand. The bacteria, if they don't get the fiber, they're going to start to eat that blue inner mucus layer because it's rich in carbohydrates. What happens next? You get damage to the cells of the lining of the intestine, which is that pink layer. And if you look on the far left, on the top layer of the cells, you have what's called a normal tight junction. The cells are very close next to each other, tightly bound, so that only nutrients can get through there. And that opens and closes and let nutrients in. But if it gets damaged, that cell layer gets damaged, what you end up having in the small intestines is you have the cell layer junctions start to get open and wider because they're damaged because of inflammation that's caused from the bacteria that start to invade the lining of the gut. And these harmful microorganisms that we all have living in us, even healthy people, they give off toxins. These toxins that these bacteria, they poop too. They're called lipopolysaccharides. Just remember LPSs. These lipopolysaccharides, or these LPSs, are very toxic, and they cause inflammation. And when they cause inflammation, they damage the lining of the gut. And as you see in this picture here, you see the junctions, which are supposed to be tight, start to get open gaps. Bacteria that could get into the gut lining, going into the cells of the lining of the gut, but now they start to go into the bloodstream. As you see in this demonstration here, pathogens, which are harmful microorganisms, and their toxic waste matter gets into the bloodstream, and it circulates and causes disease throughout the entire body. So you can see that from our gut, we end up having disease that spreads throughout the entire body. Another thing that happens is we have undigested particles of food, and you can see the blue circular areas getting through those tight junctions, get into the bloodstream. There's undigested particles of food getting into the bloodstream, causing allergic reactions. These allergic reactions are not of what we call IgE, but they're called IgG. And what they do is they cause delayed reactions. So you could be eating a food today for a breakfast, for example, and you could end up not reacting to that food because it's a delayed reaction. You may not react to it for a day or two or up to 3 to 5 days later. This is a type of reaction that's occurring from the damage to the lining of the gut and these delayed reaction food allergies. So we're not only getting toxins from bacteria, which causes a plethora of health problems. And I could show a whole nother program talking about the lipopolysaccharides, and they cause over 15 or 20 different complications throughout the body. And I'll share another program on how they do that. But for tonight, suffice to say that these toxic waste matter gets into the bloodstream, circulates throughout the blood, and then travels to different parts of the body and gets and damages the lungs and the liver and the kidneys and the brain and the heart, and the skin. Every single cell of the body is affected by these toxins and the allergic inflammatory compounds that are released inside the body, inside the bloodstream, causing a plethora of diseases, including autoimmune diseases. Autoimmune diseases are becoming rampant. 25 years ago, we had very few people who had autoimmune diseases. Today, autoimmune diseases are at epidemic levels. And so we have people with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease and lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and brain disorders, and it just goes on, and psoriasis, just skin disorders, and we have kidney diseases, and we have all kinds of autoimmune diseases that are affecting millions of Americans, and it's coming to these people as a result of the lack of fiber, not feeding the beneficial bacteria, and they're starving and they eat the lining of the gut. So my friends, this is information that a lot of people know about, but very few people are getting the information that's the most accurate of how to feed these bacteria and to get them the right nutrients and the right fuel to help them to proliferate and grow. So we're going to be getting a little bit deeper into that in a few minutes, but I just really want you to understand the complications that cause from the bacteria getting into the bloodstream. What's really interesting is these microorganisms, as they're spitting off these toxic elements and as these inflammatory compounds get into the bloodstream, as they leak into the bloodstream, we end up with these different metabolites that end up in the stool that we can actually monitor, and we can evaluate stool samples. And I've been doing this in my practice for over 30 years, evaluating stool samples and looking for various markers that I'll talk about here in a few minutes that give us information about how the lining of the gut is actually being damaged, how inflammatory compounds are being released, and how these are affecting every cell, every organ and tissue inside of the body. So let's talk a little bit about that. There are, for example, 24 different markers of inflammation. And these markers of inflammation, we can actually monitor from stool samples. For example, calprotectin is elevated when you have inflammation inside of the gut. So if you have this elevation of calprotectin, we can tell that it's coming from the gut. And then we can look at things like zonulin, which is, again, a protein molecule that if it's inside of the stool, we end up having, we know that there's damage to the lining of the gut if it's elevated. So again, these markers have profound information that we can use as physicians to see if we in fact do have a leaky gut. And the same thing with occludin and the CD14, which is a marker for inflammation, and these different compounds that we have inside of the stool that we can evaluate, and we can then tell if there's damage to the lining of the gut, and if there's inflammatory compounds, if there's toxins there, we can evaluate it in the stool. This is great information that most doctors are not taking advantage of. But again, in my practice, I've been doing it for over 35 years and have been in the forefront of this in the greater Cleveland area. And we need to recognize that we have to take charge of our health, because the conventional medicine physicians are not evaluating the stool for these markers. They're not getting to the root cause by feeding the beneficial bacteria, and they're not doing the things that are going to support the body to get to the root cause. And again, that's what we're talking about here tonight, getting to root causes. Now, the bacteria can be restored. The inflammatory markers that are inside of the blood can recede. The lining of the gut can be repaired. We can reverse all these things, but it takes time, number one. It's not going to happen overnight. And so a lot of doctors are using procedures that are outdated. And I'm going to talk about a few of those coming up right now, and talk about how people are getting sucked in by people who are influencers on the internet and doctors on the internet talking about using things like probiotics to replenish the bacteria that is lost when we end up using things like antibiotics. Let's going to talk a little bit about that right now. Okay, so here's the thing. Again, myself included, for many, many years, I have prescribed probiotics to patients who've had damage to their gut lining from taking antibiotics. I've prescribed probiotics to people who've had a lack of beneficial bacteria living inside of their gut, people who have inflammatory compounds inside their gut, people who have the leaky gut syndrome. I've actually prescribed personally probiotics, but I want to share with you the recent research shows that probiotics inhibit or slow down or block even the reproduction of the beneficial bacteria living inside of the gut. Now, that's a shocking bit of information, which most people are not aware of, and most natural doctors are not aware of. And I'm going to share with you right now some of the research. This is a little bit of a complicated slide, but I'm going to try to help to make it understandable to you. Remember, when people take antibiotics, it's no secret anymore that antibiotics destroy all bacteria, good and bad. And people are aware that when you take antibiotics, that they actually damage the healthy bacteria. They kill off bad bacteria, yes, and they can be life-saving, but they also kill off good bacteria. What you're looking at here is on the bottom is the days, okay, the days, and on the side you're looking at the different types of bacteria that live inside the gut. When you look on this graph, on the left side, you'll see 3 different pictures, okay? Okay, and 3 different colors. What they've done in this study is they took the feces, the poop of the people before they gave them antibiotics, and they froze their poop. They put it in the freezer. And then they gave these people antibiotics, and they watched, after about 5 days, there was a dramatic decline in all of the beneficial bacteria, dramatic decline for all 3 participants. The people who had their antibiotics given to them, there was one group that, again, had their poop that was frozen before they took the antibiotics. That was one group. The other group, they did nothing to. That was the group that was in blue. And then the group that's in green, they actually gave them probiotics, supplements in encapsulated form. So once again, one group, they gave them a stool sample that was frozen, and after they had the course of antibiotics, they then reimplanted their own poop back into their body. That's the first group. So they gave them antibiotics, and then after they gave them the antibiotics, they gave them their own poop back. They replanted it into their gut. That's the brown area. After about 6 days on this graph, you'll see in the brown line that it starts to significantly raise the beneficial bacteria. So remember, on the left side of the graph is the number of bacteria, and on the bottom is the number of days. So after about 6 days, the people who had their poop transplanted in them, they had a dramatic increase of beneficial bacteria again. And after about the 30th day, after about 30 days, they were back to normal. Their stool was back to normal. They had normal bacteria that they had living before they took the antibiotics. very short amount of time. The people that did nothing, that didn't take any probiotics, that's the one in blue, it took them about 3 months. You can see that the line of the blue slowly increased over time. And after about 3 months, it became again to a normal stool. So after 3 months, the people who did nothing, they took the antibiotics and did nothing. After 3 months, their own body reestablished the beneficial bacteria. What's interesting, and what's the point that I want to make here, is that the green group, that there was a dramatic decline and a slow amount of increase of beneficial bacteria, and it slowly increased, but not significantly. And you could see it hindered way below the other two groups. The green group, the line is way below those other two groups. And it slowly increased, not significantly though. And after about 3 months, it got elevated, not significantly, but then at about 3 months, it started to decline. That's the point I want to make. Very, very significant. So the group that took the probiotics, their beneficial bacteria did not significantly get elevated. They didn't grow the good bacteria back. And after about 3 months, they had a significant decline in the amount of beneficial bacteria. It started to reverse. Not a good thing. So the reason that we are able to now see these things, which we couldn't before, is there's new instrumentation that is now available in these laboratories that can evaluate how the body responds after antibiotics and how the beneficial bacteria begin to grow back with these different therapies administered. So once again, the changes that occurred, we couldn't tell before, but now we can with the new instrumentation. I want to talk a little bit about the different types of fiber that really are going to make a big difference and help to feed the beneficial bacteria. You see, all fiber in whole foods, fruits, vegetables, beans, whole grains, nuts and seeds and legumes, all fiber helps to feed the beneficial bacteria. But there's a specific type of fiber called resistance starch. And that resistant starch is found in beans and legumes. And also when you take some specific grains or potatoes or bananas and you eat them in a specific way, you increase this, what we call resistant starch, which takes longer to break down. It's food that the bacteria absolutely love. To them, it's like a superfood. They absolutely love this resistant starch. The beneficial bacteria, researchers have found, when they get this resistant starch, the bacteria thrive the most, and they increase most significantly when they get the resistant starch. So once again, eating all high fiber foods is good, but eating resistant starch is even better. So let me say this. And again, as I told you earlier, I have been for years telling people not to eat green bananas, but green bananas are rich in resistant starch. And so when you eat green bananas, you increase the beneficial bacteria inside of your gut significantly. The bacteria love them. It's superfood to them. So by all means, put some green bananas in a smoothie. Eat some green bananas every single day. And again, you don't have to eat a lot of this resistant starch. Even just small quantities will help. And then another thing is if you take potatoes, for example, or things like brown rice, which has a lot of fiber in it, or things like whole grain pastas, whether it's gluten-free, like brown rice or quinoa pasta, you can then, once you cook it, you could then refrigerate it, whether it's the brown rice or the potatoes or the whole grain, whole wheat, or the gluten-free grains, refrigerate them overnight. And you can do that with oats too, by the way. You can put the oats in the refrigerator overnight and they become significantly elevated with resistant starch. So once again, cook these grains, cook them, the oats. You can even take the raw oats, put in the refrigerator overnight. Take the brown rice, take the potatoes, take the whole grain pastas, and cook them, and then put them into the refrigerator overnight. They become resistant starch, which the bacteria absolutely love. Here's the thing I want you to realize. This is important. And as I started off early on in this conversation tonight, I said that people go on these fad diets, whether it's a FODMAP diet or a low-carb diet, like a paleo diet or a keto diet or a carnivore diet. They're reducing these resistant starches. They're reducing high-fiber foods, and they're only eating certain ones that don't irritate them and cause them to have bloating and gas and gut irritation. And the reason that they're getting these symptoms is because they don't have the right bacteria living inside of their large intestines. Remember, they've lost the populations of the beneficial bacteria. These populations of beneficial bacteria have been diminished. And so there are different type of microorganisms living in our gut, as I showed you in that slide earlier, and they're missing the types of bacteria that can degrade and break down the fiber. So that's why people end up having a lot of bloating and gas and diarrhea and other symptoms when they eat high fiber foods. So here's what you need to do. Two things. You need to get a lot of fermented foods. And when I say a lot, I mean variety a lot. Different varieties of fermented foods. That's very important to understand. These fermented foods are going to help because they have microorganisms inside of them that are going to degrade the fiber. When you eat these fermented foods, you don't want to eat too many of them at too large of quantity too quickly. So you want to slowly introduce them into your diet, but get several servings per day, small quantities. So things like sauerkraut and kimchi and yogurt and kefir and other types of fermented seaweeds and other things that you can get that are fermented, and pickles that have probiotics that are fermented. They're not probiotics added to them, they're fermented and they have probiotics in them. When you buy a jar of pickles, it needs to say with probiotics, because those fermented foods, when they're done in a specific way, will grow the bacteria inside of them. The research shows that if you're getting about 5 servings of fermented vegetables and fermented different types of foods per day, small quantities even if you get a tablespoon, even start off with a teaspoon or a tablespoon, start off slow, 5 servings a day of these various different varieties of fermented foods are going to seed the beneficial bacteria, and they're going to be starting to grow inside of your gut, and they're going to proliferate, and they're going to flourish. And then as you add these fiber foods, a very key point I want you to understand, if you have symptoms of gas and bloating and diarrhea or anything like that, you want to get some plant digestive enzymes. Get some plant digestive enzymes. Those, you can pick them up at a health food store, and they have enzymes that are plants, digestive enzymes that break down the fibers in the beans and legumes and the fruits and the vegetables and the resistant starches, and take 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of these digestive enzymes with your meal. And it's going to significantly help to break down those foods and help your digestive system along the way, so you could increase the fiber and increase the fermented foods so that you can grow the beneficial bacteria and reestablish, we call homeostasis, or a healthy gut. So once again, take your time, go slowly, and remember, there's some important rules for digesting food. You need to eat when you're hungry. That's number 1. Eat when you're not stressed. Eat when you're relaxed and you're not in a hurry. And chew your food well. All these things are important. So eat when you're relaxed. Eat when you're not in a hurry. Eat when you have a pleasant environment. Chew your food well. Each bite should be, you should chew each bite 15 to 20 different times. And eat slow. Take the digestive enzymes, get 5 servings of these fermented foods, even if they're in small quantities. Start off with a teaspoon, maybe a tablespoon, and you can increase it over time. Eat more of the fiber foods, especially the resistant starches. Again, do it slow, small amounts, but a little bit each day. And again, if you take a tablespoon of resistant starch, different varieties, 3 or 4 different varieties every single day, and increase the quantity over time, it's going to feed the beneficial bacteria. You're going to have more diversity of the good bacteria, and you're going to get healthier every single day. And you're not going to experience the gas and the bloating and all those things that people fear. The last thing I want to help you understand is you've got to identify the foods that you are reacting to because of the damage to the lining of your gut. These hidden food allergies are real, and you need to get tested. There's a specific blood test that is used, and there's specific labs that do marvelous job. And I've been doing this blood test in my clinic for 35 years. If you'd like to have a free consultation, I'd be happy to help you, but find a doctor that you trust, that you can get this specific delayed food allergy reaction test done, and then help to repair the lining of your gut. Get rid of the harmful microorganisms that are living there. There's specific herbs that you can use to do that. And again, I've been doing that for over 35 years. Get rid of the bad, replenish the good, get rid of the hidden food allergies, repair the lining of the gut, and your body will begin to heal itself from autoimmune disease, from skin disorders, from brain dysfunction, from mood disorders, from energy deficits, from all kinds of autoimmune diseases. Your body wants to heal itself. You need to work with your body to do that. So my friends, next week I'll continue to talk about some of the effects of these various research studies that show how these various foods and these various techniques can help to improve the beneficial bacteria living inside of our gut. And I will continue to scour the research to bring you the latest updated information so that you and your family can live independently healthy. So once again, I want to thank you for joining me tonight. And if you like this podcast, tell your friends about it, subscribe to my channel, and join my school community. That's skool.com. That's skool.com, where I have just a plethora of information. I've got so much free information there to educate you, not to medicate you, educate you, so that you and your family can take charge of your health and learn how to be able to assist the body in its effort to heal itself. Go to theskool.com, become a member, and get the free courses that I have, get the free information that I have. I'm going to be coming in there once a week to answer your questions and to be able to help you to be able to take advantage of the potential of the body to heal itself. So until next time, my friends, ciao for now. I'll talk to you next week here on The Other Side of Medicine.